Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we will be reviewing the Handbrake Sequential set from SG Racing, a full-size shifter and handbrake for your dirt driving pleasure. A good-looking, solidly built pair of sim racing controls. Time to put them through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. Now for our closer look segment on the SG Racing combination handbrake shifter set, or kit, if you will. Now, first off, when you get this out of the box, it is a real life-size, what I would call a real life-size type of peripheral or shifter handbrake unit that you would see in a real car. And this is the kind of setup that I personally prefer instead of the little stuff, even though the little stuff like shifters and handbrakes still do a good job and get the job done. It's just when you have something like this bolted to your rig, and it's a life size like typically what you would have in the car, it just adds to the immersion a bit. Now, I already did a review, as you guys probably know, if you've watched my channel at all, on the shifter alone, all right? And I'll be referencing some of this as we're talking about this. But now we have the handbrake, and that is the taller piece here. And we'll go over some dimensions right now. This whole unit comes in at just under 5 pounds, or for everybody else in the world, 2.23 kilos. So it has a good heft to it. We have a bottom mounting plate where both of these units are mounted to, and this plate itself is 6 millimeters thick. Its dimensions are 123 by 121, so it's 2 millimeters longer or wider, depending on how you're looking at it. And I'm not sure why it ended up that way, but that's the way it is. We have holes in here for mounting, and we'll talk about mounting this puppy later on. And you can see our holes are a little bit different as far as the spacing goes, between the shifter being wider and the handbrake being a little bit more narrower on the bottom. I like this plate on the bottom for mounting. I like the way they've done this. Nothing like getting a solid mount, or at least as solid as we can get when we have this kind of a unit sitting on top of a piece of profile. But again, we'll talk about that when we get to the mounting. Now, this is a heavy duty built unit. Just like my shifter review before, this is all nice thick aluminum plate. It gives you the feeling that, yeah, this is going to be a long lasting, durable unit under regular use. The side plates themselves on both of these, on the shifter and the handbrake, are 8 millimeters thick aluminum plate. And you can see this is all a kind of a triangle, then not a triangle on the bottom here shape, and they're all the same shape. Now we have some end plates. Now there's a bolt that runs through this. It's a big M8 or long M8 socket head cap unit. We have an acorn bolt on the other side, and this is what actuates whatever we're pulling, the handbrake or the shifter. And this is built even thicker. It's 10 millimeters thick. So yeah, pretty heavy duty here. Now the levers themselves, and of course there are different heights on the lever, we'll talk about that in a second. The lever itself is 15 millimeters thick here. And you can see that it has some nice accents in it where they put some holes, and then they have a kind of a countersunk or counter bevel on those holes. Give it a little styling, aesthetic look to it. And they're actually 25 millimeters wide. So this, again, is a very substantial piece of aluminum that we're using in the lever roll. Right. The height of this. Okay. So there's a 20 millimeter difference in the height between the handbrake over here and the shifter over here. So that comes out to be 348 millimeters for the shifter, which, by the way, is exactly the same height as this one is, the one I reviewed before. And that makes sense because they're still using the 6 millimeter aluminum plate and the same bolting pattern, virtually the same shifter. So this is 368 millimeters high. So you can use these dimensions to get a sense of how it would fit in your rig if you did get a unit like this. Right. What else are we going to talk about? The aesthetics, again, we have some carbon fiber stickers, if you will, decal type things on here. You can actually feel the grain to this. So, and it looks nice. I like the way they did this. It has a nice SG Racing plate on the bottom there. And all of the little screws going in are all socket cap head units. Kind of blends in nicely with everything, I think. And we have a M8 bolt also up here and for the pivot point. And this is an M8 bolt. And on the other side, we have an acorn bolt, and the same thing over here on the handbrake. So those are the same too, which makes sense. Now, what else can we talk about here aesthetically? The carbon fiber pieces or decals you put on. I want to show you guys this. If you notice, there's a little bit different look to this one over here. That is because the lamination has come off. This is, again, a decal, right? And I scratched the lamination on it. It's got some kind of a, I'm not sure, lacquer coating, for lack of a better word, probably water-based lacquer or something like that. And you can see underneath, it has a more of a matte finish to it. Like here, same kind of finish we have on this. I'm not sure why this has that finish on it, to be quite honest. I prefer this one. I'm not crazy about the shiny on there, but I did scrape it and some of it came off. So you can see here, then I went ahead and just took my fingernail and just did this very lightly and it came right off. So it flaked off very easily. So if it happens to you, then yeah, it's easy to rectify just by taking, and I didn't do it all the way so I could show you guys the difference right here. So I was just taking my fingernail. I'll show you how I did it there. And just, it flakes right off like that. And you can kind of brush it off. It will be a little bit of a mess, so get the vacuum cleaner out or your brush out to clean it up. But anyway, just want to show you that. So if it happens to you, you can fix that so it doesn't really affect the appearance of your shifter set. Right. What else aesthetically can we talk about? A closer look. The handles on these. I do like the handles. I really like the handle on the shifter itself. These handles are aluminum, solid piece of aluminum. Obviously, we have some holes drilled in it for threads and things. And on the top, they also have the carbon fiber pieces that are similar to the ones here, not the ones on the levers themselves, the glossy stuff. So yeah, this won't ever, you won't have to ever scrape that one off if it ever starts scratching on you. In fact, I scratched it again on the back here. Oh, that's going to show up right in here. See a little scratch there? So yeah, if I was going to keep this and put it on my rig, I would definitely just go ahead and just kind of rub that stuff off, because you know it's going to reach over and grab it, have a ring on your hand, something, it's going to scrape it. So what else can we talk about? Oh, the handles. I want to show you the close-up of this handle, or this grip. And it won't come off of these. Probably has some kind of a Loctite on it, and I didn't want to go to the, the effort of really prying on it, trying to get it off, when I have another one sitting over here that's exactly the same thing, but a little different because these actually have an indentation cut out for this carbon piece, and this is just a smooth piece of machined aluminum on the end of the handle. All right. Now the handle's it's got some weight to it, and the knurling on this is very good. I don't know how well that shows up in the camera, but it gives you a very good grip. Glove or hand, it doesn't matter. In fact, hand, I wouldn't want to use this for a couple hours, I think, at the same time, because a hand, it might actually put some wear on your skin there. But I do like the grip. It's very good. And yeah, for a shifter or a handbrake, grip is kind of makes or breaks them at the end of the day. And you can see they've also machined and tapped a hole in the bottom there that they put this little insert in so that we can screw it into this part of the shifter. All right, so one more thing I want to mention about this. This is the switches on here. We can see we have switches. Let's see how you guys can see this. Okay, over here you can see there's my switch. And this is the shifter, all right? So it hits that switch when we push it and pull it the other way. There's another switch down there. Pretty simple. But under here, we can also see, let me just flip this around. There's a switch here on the brake, all right? So this brake is a switch brake. It's not based on a potentiometer, which means that it's either on or off. And that brings its own characteristics to the behavior of your handbrake when you're using it in game. And I'll talk more about that as we go along. But yeah, something like a potentiometer here would give us more of an analogish feel based on how far we moved the handbrake would dictate how much brake we're applying. Here, you can't do that. It's just on or off, and that's all you get, which you can learn to use. I learned to get pretty good with it because it was the same amount of braking every single time because it's a switch, and there was no modulation of that braking force or how much I applied to the rear wheels when I did that. But again, I'll talk more about that probably when we do the look inside, and also when I'm actually doing the driving. Simple, effective, probably keeps the cost down, and yeah, this is what I would consider a very affordable full-size peripheral or hardware unit for shifting and braking purposes. So yeah, overall, I like it. In the closer look section, when I first got it out of the box, I like the way it's set up. There is a small amount of stagger here, Let's see if I can hold it as square as possible to the lens. But you can see just a little bit of a stagger there with the handbrake being a little bit forward of the shifter, depending on how you mount it, of course. Because this is the shifter up here, and that's the handbrake in the rear there. So if I line, you can see it's sticking back just a bit. I would say, 10 millimeters max. So it does have a stagger to it, and I had it mounted like this on my cockpit. Shifter here, handbrake here, because that's typically how you will see this setup. The shifter will be here. Sometimes you'll see a handbrake behind it, whatever. But yeah, this is a little bit offset forward, which really didn't affect anything as far as my driving. Everything was just naturally there, being next to each other like that. And it was easy to figure out which one was a shifter and which one was the handbrake based on the distance your reach was on lateral reach when you're going for what you needed, right? So it worked out. It was fine. And we also have a controller box in here. I'm going to show you that. So we have these switches routing into via these cables into this controller box. All right, and I'll probably take that off and see what kind of controller board he's using. And then on the other side, you can see the USB cord, which is exiting that controller box. The USB cord is 1400 millimeters. I believe that's 1.4 meters, almost 1.5 meters. I would have liked to see another foot or so on this. Maybe just go ahead and make it a 2-meter cable, just because of the, I use a motion rig and everything's further away from my computer and my USB hub and stuff like that. Every little bit helps when it comes to the length of cables. I'll never criticize a company for giving me a cable too long. And this wasn't too short. It did actually work, and I drove with it just like that, and the reach was fine for me, but it just barely made it. And I'd like to see maybe just a little bit of slack in there for cable management, if nothing else, being able to route it around things and zip tie it down. So anyway, that's going to be it for the closer look. Now for our look inside segment for the sequential shifter. Now, I'm not going to open this one up because I've already done a look inside of the shifter over here on this one. And this was the original sequential shifter that SRG Racing sent to me. And I did, again, a look inside of that, took it all apart and showed you guys that. And this one is essentially the same as the other one, with just a couple of little differences, nothing really that important, except maybe they've gone to a bigger bolt on the pivot bolt here. Now, I'll show you this one. This is the original. This is an M6 bolt, and it has a shank on it, so it's smooth bore bolt, or it's a smooth bolt until we get over here where the threads are that go into our threaded hole on this side. And again, it's an M6. Here, they're doing it a bit differently. Here we have an M8 bolt going all the way through without threads on the other side, and we're using an acorn nut. Now, this bolt going through, just like over here on the handbrake, is a shanked bolt. And I'll just push that out a little bit, so I'll show you guys what that means. And that means it's a smooth, see how it's smooth under there? There's no threads. There's only threads at the end over here. And the reason you do that on a pivot point is so that there is a smooth shaft that everything is pivoting on. Get that back on there. And yeah, so it stays smooth. And there's a bushing in there too, but we'll see. And again, you'll see that in the other review. Everything else remains the same on how they set it up. And you see I have a switch hanging off here, but that's for the handbrake, and we'll talk about that when we do the look inside handbrake. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and insert that clip from the original sequential shifter review now. Now for our look inside segment on the SRG Racing sequential shifter. First off, carefully turn this up. You can see I've taken the aluminum plate off, the 8mm thick aluminum plate. And yeah, this is a very sturdy shifter the way this thing is built. And I left this on so I could show you the washer in here, or bushing if you will, that reduces the friction between when you're actually manipulating the shifter bar back and forth on the aluminum surface itself. I'm going to take that off so we can see what's going on behind it. And we can see here, let me get this out of the way. We can see here that there is a bronze bushing in there that the bolt is riding on. Now this is again the socket head cap, but you can see it is a shanked bolt. So it's all smooth right through there. So it's actually rotating on that smooth shank part, which gives it a smooth motion. Very well built. I mean, when you pull this open, you can see this is well thought out and well built piece here. We have the switches here, and again, they have these little rollers on them. You see a little roller there. And the switches don't go that far in. You can do it right there. You could probably adjust this to go with a little bit more throw, but yeah, I'm not sure if I would even bother because the switches can't move but so far, and you don't want to obviously be ramming this aluminum bar into the switch and armature here, cause it to bind up against the housing of the switch itself. As far as the switches go, I don't see any branding on them, but I can give you a quick look at it so you can at least see what the information is on it. All right, I'm being careful here because I don't want anything to fall apart. And on the bottom here, you can see that they've actually milled out this solid aluminum bar to act as a spacer between these two springs. And the springs are what, of course, are giving us our tension when we're pushing this back and forth. And these are very strong springs and a lot of tension on it. You saw what I had to do to actually manipulate it in the closer look. So there's no way I can do it in this condition. I have nothing to grab on to brace. So we're just not going to do that. But yeah, there are some washers in here. You can see there's a stack of washers on this side. We have two here. Actually, there's three, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's three. Yeah, because there's definitely three on this side. So that's a spacer for the spring tension. I imagine you could actually take one of these washers out on each side at a time, or two at a time, basically, to keep it equal, and maybe adjust the spring tension if you wanted to. The stops themselves, you can see these are actually carriage bolts. See a little square side on them, and then the smooth piece on the top there. So he's using a carriage bolt. Obviously, it's going through this 10mm thick plate and capturing it over here with that acorn nut. And yeah, and we have some socket head caps that are actually screwed into each side of the 15mm thick shifter lever. So yeah, I like what I see in here. It's very neat. Yeah, I mean, this is a well-built shifter. You can tell that just from the, all the metal parts. There's no 3D printed parts in here or anything like that. So yeah, again, I can't really find too much fault with what I'm looking at here. I don't know about you guys. And again, we can see we have this cable gable assembly here holding our USB, but that's about it. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for the look inside of the SRG Racing Sequential. Now for our look inside segment on the Handbrake piece of this dual piece unit. This is a pretty simple unit compared to the shifter over here, and we'll look at a couple of differences as we go along. I have removed the side plate, or one of the side plates. You can see one is still attached. These very thick 8mm aluminum plates. I really like the way these shifters and their handbrake is constructed. Very, very heavy duty stuff, and it gives you the impression when you're using it and handling it that it should have a very long life cycle, at least on the frame and the integral parts of it that are giving it its mass, if you will, its structural integrity. And again, that's you can see a little edge there maybe. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up, but that's the carbon fiber sticker thing that they put on there. And it does have a grain to it. The holes here that are on this side, holding our big 10mm plates on there, they are using M6 bolts that we have here. I took these out to get that other side off. So yeah, very nice that they're using M6. And we're using an acorn nut on the other side of this plate, like this. And the bolt that goes through, I'm going to push this out so you can see it. First off, we'll go ahead and take one of these plastic washers off. And of course, that gives us smooth movement for the lever. And the lever is rotating on a bronze bushing in there. The thread actually stops. Well, you guys can see that. See how it's actually stops just after it exits the lever itself. And that's fully pushed in on the other side. So that means that we have this smooth shank on this bolt, and I'll push it out the other side so you can see it right there. So that's what the bushing is rotating on when we pull the lever. Very nice. I like the way that's done. Heavy duty too. So we'll go ahead and put this guy back on. And here we can see there is a spacer because the handbrake does not move in this direction. The handbrake only moves as I pull it towards myself, and that should, well, that's not going to be easy to do here, unfortunately, because there's no support for it. But anyway, it pulls against the spring, all right? So, and that's the spacer for the return stop. So we have the return stop here, the spring here. The lever actually goes this way and engages the switch that's sitting on these two screws. You see how that screw's working there? He's got some other nuts here. I got it kind of loose right at the moment because I took the switch off. And I'll show you why I took the switch off in a minute. But yeah, that's how it goes on the switch. And then we have two nuts, these little teeny guys over here, 5.5 millimeter hex type of nut there, very small, that goes on there on the other side of the switch. And I'll show you how that works. Get my acorn out of the way. I had to leave it on this part, and I decided it was easier to take one switch off than two switches off because we have two switches on the shifter, one on that side and one on that side, because it is a sequential. It's moving back and forth. And we only have one switch here on the brake, but I'll show you what that switch looks like. And it fits in here on this piece. See those two screws? You got to kind of compress it a little bit, and it just slides onto those two screws through the holes here in the switch housing. Get a closer look at that. All right, there we go. So there's our switch. You can see that there's a little button underneath this lever, and this is a steel lever with a roller in it. And I like to see the roller in there instead of just maybe a piece of metal that this, or rather the shaft over there on the handbrake is pushing against, because there is kind of an angle when we're using this that roller enables it to slide a little easier. Let me try to use my little pointer here as a guide. And as I push that down, I don't know if you can hear that. There you go. That roller will allow a nice smooth motion on that lever without anything binding up. So again, when you see a roller on there, it tends to give longer life cycle on the switch itself as far as the moving parts go, instead of just having a piece of metal up there. I like to see that roller on there. The switch itself, I'm going to hold it up there so you guys can take a look at it. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see what's on there. There's one side, and we'll do the other side in case you want to buy a switch someday. Something happens, you got to replace it. All right, and it's just a two blade. You can see it's just soldered on there. Everything's well done. Good little shrink wrap there. Well done job everywhere you look. And of course, this is a little cable gable, if you will, keeper that we screw back into our shifter, or rather our handbrake assembly. And that screws into, with another M6 bolt, into the top of that or rather 10 millimeter thick plate. Very good construction here. Everything's, yeah, just as solid as you might imagine as you can get, I suppose, in a shifter. Plus it's a compact design. Yeah, I really don't have anything to complain about here. I mean, everything's just done quite well. Yeah, and you can see obviously, and I'm going to show you the single switch here because we're only going in one direction. And on the shifter, if you saw the look inside, you've already seen this, we have a spring on either side here. And these are stiffer springs, by the way, than what's on the handbrake, which makes sense because we're just shoving this and pulling this back in very quick actions. Right. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Not a whole lot to see here on the look inside on the handbrake. And yeah, so we'll just get to our next segment. Now for our look inside segment on the electronics of this SG Racing handbrake shifter combination. Now, not a whole lot to show you here. You've already seen the switch. I showed you that in the look inside of the handbrake. But we have 3 switches here total. One here, obviously, for the handbrake, and we have one on the sequential on one side over here, and careful I'm not messing things up here, over here on the other side, right? Pretty simple. These are just momentary switches. One click, and that's all you get, on or off. And that makes sense for a shifter. Now, the box itself, inside of this, is I don't know how all these guys can see. Let's try to hold it up for you here, but it's connected to the other switches, so it's not going to be easy. But it's a common board. It's called a Pro Micro USB conversion board. And you see that little USB mini socket on one end up there. All the wires are soldered on. Nicely done job, by the way. Whoever soldered this knows what they're doing. This cable here that we saw before, the USB cable, right? USB-A on this end of it, has a USB micro on the other side, and it's just sitting in this housing, or this box, if you will, in the groove. There's a groove right here, and this cable goes in there and plugs into the other side of our Pro Micro board. Very simple, very easy, but effective, right? If you want to take this out, if you have a problem with the board or whatever, if you ever do any maintenance, be mindful that the lid that goes on here, first off, you need to affix it to the plate over here. There is a hole, a very small one, you can see that, about an M3, and it's got threads in it. And there is a small bolt sticking out the bottom here. I didn't bother to take it out, right there. Right, and that attaches this housing to the plate in between, as we saw before in the closer look, where the shifter and the handbrake are mounting. Easy enough to put this back together, but again, be mindful that under the decal here, this little carbon fiber decal, there are two Phillips head screws hiding, right? And they've got the coarse plastic thread on them, one on either side. So don't be prying on this thing thinking you're going to get it off, because you'll end up tearing it to pieces if you don't take a heat gun. That's why I usually, my heat gun's way over there, and just loosen up the glue a little bit. You can peel it back, get your screws loose, and now when I screw this back in, I can get my heat gun out again, heat that back up, and lay it back down, and it just as pretty as you please. You'll never know I was in there. Well, maybe not. So yeah, not much else to look at on the look inside for the electronics. So we'll just get to our next segment. Let's take a look at the mounting solution they have on this combination of shifter and handbrake. On the bottom of this 6mm thick plate, which is a nice mounting surface, by the way, we have two very large holes, one on each side, and this is for mounting onto an 80/20 profile or aluminum extrusion type of setup, which is what I have with my SimLab P1X. Now, it's a very simple matter here. This is a representation of the profile that you have on your P1X for, and other profile rigs also use the exact same thing. It's just a 40/80 piece that runs from the front to the back, from the front of the wheelbase, usually the wheelbase uprights where you attach this, either on the side of it or directly butted up against it, and then it runs back towards the rear and supported by another piece that comes down from the bottom with a couple of gusseted corner brackets supporting that part. Right. Pretty simple stuff. And we're going to use some spring T-nuts, and they'll just fit right in the channels like that. Bring it to move. There it goes. And then we'll just set this on top. I'm thinking I have enough room here. So this will go on top, and these two holes will line up with those T-nuts, like so. And then we can come in with our socket cap head bolts, and these are M8s. And they'll just fit right down in there like that in the back of our profile. And I'll have another one in the front. And yeah, it's pretty simple. Not a lot to show you here on the first part of the mounting video in our mounting segment. But when we come back, we'll have it mounted up to the P1X and take a look at it. So we have the shifter and the handbrake mounted now. Like I discussed before, I'm going to be using an M8 bolt and a T-nut in this 6mm thick aluminum base plate that everything's attached to. Working pretty good. We do have the other hole in the front occupied by another M8 bolt, and you can see the USB cable coming out here, and it's routing down the front of this motion rig down into the darkness down in there with the rest of those cables next to my Mecha Cup 1 pedal set. And it comes out the front and goes to the USB hub. You see all those USB plugs there? That's a powered USB hub so that all the USB peripherals get plenty of juice when everything's running. And yes, so pretty easy install, and it's very solid as far as going back and forth when you grab the handle. And I've already tested it a little bit. If you grab the handle and pulling back on it, yeah, it's very solid feeling. And you'll see that when I'm actually in the rig and actually testing it out. There is some lateral movement here, but we have such a long lever here, and we're as far as down there is where it's connected, and these things are so tall that, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that I can move this sideways, but I won't be pulling it sideways. I'm pulling it back and forth, right? So when I'm actually using it, and of course I've already been in this using these, you really can't tell there's any flex in it. It just operates like you would think it would operate. Not quite as stiff and as heavy duty as my SimWorks Sequential and my Husingville handbrake setup, but it feels pretty good, I must say. So let's go ahead and get in and do some driving, and we'll talk about it then. So here we are in iRacing at Sonoma's Rallycross track in the Ford Fiesta. The first thing here is when I was talking about the mounting before we got to the driving part, there was some lateral movement when I was pushing them sideways. But when you see me shifting here, you can see that it's not moving at all. It's pretty solid. And it feels that way when you're actually using the shifter and when you're using the handbrake. So it all feels good there once it's mounted. Now it could be mounted a little more solidly, sure. Look at the plate there, only about a third of it's actually mounted to the profile on that 4080 profile edge. So when you're actually in the heat of battle and you're driving hard, it just feels like it could be attached to a real car and you're in a real car, and that's what this set wants to be. It wants to be the set that you feel like you're really in a car. And I mentioned this in the review, during the review, that because they're big, full-size levers, it does give you an added sense of immersion of being in a dirt car where you're actually using a sequential shifter and you're using a handbrake. The sequential shifter, I reviewed this before, and it feels just the same to me. Maybe a little bit more throw this time in this shifter. They may have changed that a little bit on the stops internally, but otherwise it feels the same. It feels rugged enough to where you can slap it around all day and not worry about it breaking. And yeah, it's just one of those things that if you saw the closer look inside, that yeah, these things are built very, very well with these thick aluminum plates. Now, let's talk about the handbrake, which you just saw me use there. Now remember, this handbrake is based on just a switch. So there is no modulation, if you will, of your handbrake. It's just on or off. So it snaps on, like right here, when I pull it, it's just full on. So there's no way for me to enter the turn any other way, and there's no way for me to modulate from if I'm going to a sharp turn or I'm going into a sweeping turn. I might want to use a little less of the handbrake, but yeah, it is what it is here with the switch. It just snaps you around. Now that doesn't mean that you can't get used to it, and I'm used to a load cell based handbrake. That's the one I use every day, but this one is, yeah, see how it just snaps you around? But after a few laps, you get used to what that does in the turns as you're approaching the turns where you want to use some handbrake and get the rear end to come around. And yeah, you just get used to it. And after a while, it really didn't bother me at all. I knew what was going to happen when I pulled that lever. And it's nice to be able to pull a lever. And I mean, it does have some travel, as you can see where I was using it there. It actually has longer travel than the shifter itself does. And you can feel those differences when you're in the car and driving it. So yeah, when I'm pulling it here, see how much further I'm pulling it than the shifter when I'm doing a shift. So it does feel like you're pulling a brake lever, but the action is something that you do have to get used to if you have never used one, number one. Number two, if you're used to one that got a potentiometer in it with some bumpers and springs or something, or a load cell where you can actually apply the brakes with a modulation. In other words, a little bit if I want a little bit, a lot if I want a lot, just like in a real car's hydraulic system. Be that as it may, at the end of the day, it still does what it needs to do. I do prefer the modular type of handbrake personally, but all this stuff is subjective. I think at the price point that you're getting a pretty good deal here with both of these working together like they do. I mean, they just go together. You know, when you grab one handle and you grab the other handle, it just feels the same, and you get used to it pretty quick as a tandem, and it's just one of those things that's fun to use. I mean, it looks like I'm having fun here, and I am. So yeah, just saying that I'd like to see a modular or some kind of a handbrake that you can modulate a little bit with, but at the end of the day, it still gets the job done. And yeah, so anyway, that's it for the driving segment, and what we'll do is get on to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on SG Racing's handbrake and sequential shifter set. I published a review of the SG Racing sequential shifter a few months ago. Everything I mentioned in that review carries over to this one as far as the shifter is concerned. Just a solid, strong, and well-built unit. This one may have a bit more throw, but other than that, it felt much the same. The new handbrake unit is also built like a tank, using the same thick aluminum plate construction as the shifter. Both units have thick, long levers that are topped off with a 30mm diameter knob, which has aggressive knurling machined into it. This makes for an excellent grip that will not get slippery if your hands get sweaty. SG Racing decided to go with a switch for brake activation instead of a potentiometer or some other modulatable solution. This did require a bit of a learning curve for me, as my daily driver handbrake is one with a load cell in it that allows me to modulate how much brake I want to use. A switch is either on or off, so all the braking force available in the car you are driving is used when you pull the lever. Once I was familiar with how much the car's rear end snapped when I used the brake, it was not too hard to adapt to. I still prefer a brake lever that you can modulate the brake pressure with. It is much more car-like than a switch. The good news is, even though it is a switch, the life-size lever that actions it is a pleasure to use and adds back to the immersion that a handbrake based on a switch can take away. Overall, this is a well-built shifter and handbrake setup for those who want one. It's always a good thing to be able to use full-size controls in your cockpit to get you deeper into the immersion waters. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.